Have you ever seen a mountain or hillside suddenly give way? With rocks, trees, and dirt tumbling down in a massive wave? If not, these are totally real events that can happen, and not just in the movies. You might think that these massive failures are just random acts of nature, but there's actually a lot of science behind why and how they happen. In this video, we're going to explore the fascinating world of landslides. We'll tell you all about the secrets behind landslides, how engineers study and prevent them, and why knowing this stuff is so important. Let's dive in. So, what exactly is a landslide? Well, first, imagine a giant hill covered with layers of soil, rocks, and plants. A landslide happens when a chunk of this hill slides, rolls, or flows downhill in one big movement. This can happen suddenly or slowly over time. But there's always one key player involved: gravity. You've probably heard of gravity before. It's the force that pulls everything toward the center of the earth. And on a slope, gravity is constantly pulling the soil, rocks, and trees downward. Well, if the hill is steep enough, gravity can overcome whatever is holding the soil in place. And that's when things start to move. But for a landslide to really get going, other factors usually need to come into play. One of the biggest troublemakers for a hillside is water. When it rains, water seeps into the ground and fills up the tiny gaps between soil particles. Engineers call these gaps pore spaces, and when water fills them, it's called pore water. Soil can actually be compared to a sponge. When you pour water onto a sponge, it fills up and becomes heavy and slippery. The same thing happens to soil on a slope when it absorbs water. It becomes heavier, and gravity pulls on it even more. Not only that, but water acts like a lubricant, making it easier for the soil to slip downhill. It's kind of like trying to hold onto a wet bar of soap. It's hard to grip, right? That's exactly what happens to soil on a slope during heavy rains. Now, here's another term that engineers use: shear strength. This might sound fancy, but it's basically the soil's superpower that holds it together and stops it from sliding. Imagine building a sandcastle with moist sand. It holds its shape pretty well because the grains of sand stick together with the tiny bit of water that is in the sand. But what happens if you pour too much water onto that sandcastle? It collapses. The same thing happens on a hillside. When water fills up those pore spaces in the soil, it weakens its grip, making it more likely to slide. So, too much water can reduce the soil's shear strength. It's like the soil loses its glue and becomes slippery, just like that wet bar of soap. Water not only makes the soil slippery, but it also makes it heavier. And remember how gravity is always trying to pull things downhill? Well, the heavier the soil, the more force gravity has to work with. If the soil gets too heavy and its shear strength gets too weak, the entire hillside can start to move. Now that we know how water can cause landslides, let's talk about the different ways these slides can happen. Believe it or not all landslides look the same. Sometimes a chunk of soil and rock moves down a slope in a straight or curved path, almost like it's sliding down a giant board. This type is called a slide. Imagine cutting a big slice of cake and tilting the plate. If the cake slides off in one piece, that's what this type of landslide looks like. Then there are landslides called flows. These are more like rivers of mud moving downhill. In this case, the soil mixes with a lot of water, turning into a thick, muddy soup that flows quickly. Engineers call this a debris flow or mud flow. These flows can move really fast and carry rocks, trees, and even cars with them. Think of it as a river of mud rushing downhill, sweeping everything in its path. Another type is called a fall. This happens when rocks break off from a steep slope or cliff and fall directly downward. These usually happen in mountainous areas where loose rocks are barely hanging on. Picture a bunch of marbles rolling off the edge of a table. That's what a rock fall looks like. And then there are topples. This happens when a block of rock tilts forward and falls, often because weathering or erosion has loosened the base of the slope. It's like when you stack books and push the top one until it tips over. So far, we've mostly talked about water as a cause of landslides, but there are other triggers too, like earthquakes. When an earthquake hits, it shakes the ground and causes cracks to form in the soil and rocks. This shaking can mess up the balance of a slope and make it more likely to slide. Imagine shaking a sandcastle. It falls apart because the shaking jostles the grains of sand that were holding it together. And unfortunately, humans can be a big part of the problem too. When we dig into hillsides to build roads, houses, or other structures, we change the natural balance of the slope. Engineers call this slope modification. For instance, removing trees can weaken a slope because tree roots help hold the soil together. Or when we dig into the bottom of a hill, known as the slope's toe, we can make the whole thing unstable. So, when have these landslides actually happened? One was actually a very tragic event that happened in Oso, Washington in 2014. There was a ton of rain that had soaked the soil, which weakened its sheer strength. The soil became super heavy and slippery, and when the ground couldn't hold together anymore, it gave way. This sent a massive wall of mud, trees, and debris rushing downhill at high speed. The landslide covered over a square mile of land and tragically buried homes and roads, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. Another major landslide happened back in 1985 near the town of Armero, Colombia. This landslide was triggered by a volcanic eruption from the Nevado del Ruiz volcano. The eruption melted the snow and glaciers on the volcano's peak, creating massive mudflows, also known as lahars. These mudflows traveled down the slopes at terrifying speeds, engulfing the town below. The entire town ended up getting buried under thick layers of mud and debris. The event killed thousands of people and is remembered as one of the deadliest volcanic-related landslides in history. So how do engineers prevent landslides from happening? They have a bunch of cool techniques to keep slopes stable. One method is building things called retaining walls. These are strong walls built at the base of a slope to support the soil and stop it from moving downhill. The walls act as barriers, holding everything in place. Another method engineers use is installing drainage systems to control water. Engineers place pipes and drains in the slope to remove excess water. By reducing the amount of water in those porous spaces, they can lower the risk of a landslide. It's like poking holes in a sponge to let the water drain out, making it lighter and less slippery. In places like Hong Kong, where steep hillsides are everywhere, engineers have used both of these things to help prevent landslides. They also keep a close eye on the slopes, especially during the rainy season, to look out for early signs of movement and take action before a landslide happens. Other options to stabilize slopes are planting vegetation, like trees and shrubs. The roots act like natural anchors, holding the soil together and increasing its sheer strength. Think of the roots as ropes that grab onto the soil and keep it from sliding, kind of like how campers use ropes to hold down a tent. Sometimes, engineers also reshape the slope to make it less steep, which is called grading the slope. A shallower slope means gravity doesn't have as much power to pull the soil down. It's like flattening a pile of sand. The less steep it is, the harder it is for the sand to slide off. Another thing engineers can do is install long metal rods called soil nails. These nails are driven deep into the ground to anchor the soil and rock in place. The soil nails hold everything together and add extra support. So, what we have learned is that even though landslides are powerful and can be dangerous, they don't just happen out of nowhere. By understanding the science behind them, geotechnical engineers work hard to keep us safe, whether we're driving through mountains or building homes on hillsides. So next time you see a steep slope, remember that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than meets the eye. Thanks for watching. We hope you had fun learning about the geotechnical engineering behind landslides and what we can do to help prevent them. Be sure to check out our other videos and remember to like and subscribe to our channel because engineering is for everyone.